I'm so excited to be able to continue to talk about ski jumping here on Off the Podium today. We're on a bit of a run right now with our guests to talk about ski jumping. And our first guest today, who has actually been to the Olympics already, an American ski jumper, competed in the Pyeongchang Olympics in 2018. And as we get closer and closer to Beijing, I'm excited to learn more about that experience, his career in the sport, and everything else in between. It is a pleasure to welcome to the show today, Casey Larson. Casey, first of all, welcome Off the Podium. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, excited.
It's exciting to also know the little stat that you apparently are officially the 100,000th Olympian, which was a little fact that was dropped to you during the Pyeongchang Olympics. Now, how is that told to you? Like, does somebody just kind of tap you on the shoulder once you've landed after your first run and go, by the way, by competing that jump, you are the 100,000th Olympian?
No, I mean, it seems pretty weird and it's convoluted. Like, it's confusing to me. I mean, I got told at a presser, basically, like an interview, that I was like the 100,000th Olympian. And as an athlete, it means absolutely nothing to me. I don't think it's supposed to. Like, I couldn't care less. I should have, I think, in the long run of things, I regret not playing it up more and making it more of a big deal and maybe gaining some popularity off of it. But no, at the Olympics, that was not at all what I was focused on. That's for sure. But it was cool to have that little, Mr. 100,000 or whatever they were calling me for a little while there. But yeah, at the games, I was pretty focused on what I had to do there. But
it's fascinating that the historian who came up with that knew that. So I'd like to think he was literally sitting there during the Olympics going, okay, this is the schedule, this is how it plays out, these are all the debut Olympians, and by the time we get to you, it's like, okay, I'm doing my math correctly, all right, if he officially goes, 100,000, there it is. Like, it's the stats involved in collecting that fact is incredible.
Yeah, 100,000 is a big number, bigger than I care to. I mean, I don't count that. I don't even know what that is. So for me, it's like, it was pretty interesting that, being number 16 on that day, I just happened to be the 100,000th Olympian, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's definitely not, it's not taken lightly by me. I mean, I think it is a big deal, and there has been that many Olympians throughout the years, and it is cool. But it's, in the long run of things, it hasn't changed my life in any way.
The IOC doesn't give you a quick call and go, by the way, Casey, here's a bonus check for being so
sadly, no, I
good.
wish.
Which I always love to find out, of course, how our guests get involved in the sport. So your journey through ski jumping, sort of, how did you discover the sport that obviously ultimately has kind of formed your career as an athlete?
Yeah, totally. I started ski jumping when I was 6 years old. I'm from the Chicagoland area, the northwest suburbs of Chicago, about 40-minute drive outside of there. And we have a ski jumping club called the Nordic Ski Club. We have up to a K70 meter, so a jump big enough to definitely get your legs under you and figure out the sport. And we obviously have a big, a ton of jumps. We have a 5, 10, 20, 40, 70. So we have this huge, amazing junior program and junior club. And I was lucky enough to be with some teammates growing up there that were all really, really good. And we didn't really, a great club coach, and just kind of pushed ourselves and didn't really realize until high school, that this could be a real possibility. And that, because I played American football, I played baseball, I played lacrosse, I did the whole team sport gambit. But I think something just drew me to ski jumping, and then, was able to go to the Olympics in 2018 after obviously graduating high school in December of 2016, graduated a semester early. But kind of since then, it's just been, I made Park City, Utah, a little bit of my home base, and just have been kind of splitting time between Park City, Utah, and Slovenia, where we live in Kran, Slovenia, where they have a rich history of ski jumping and stuff like that. And our coaches are from there. So when we're in Europe, which is kind of where the sport is based for the most part, competition-wise, that's where we live.
It's fascinating to kind of learn just how young ski jumpers get started. That's one thing that I've really been interested in learning since we've had a few on the show, because to me, it doesn't seem like it's a sport where you're talking, say, about American football, baseball, you can kind of easily go to your local field and pick that up. I mean, this is a unique sport in the fact you need a pretty unique facility. It's a bit of an adrenaline sport, and I can't imagine it's a sport that your parents are exactly going, hey, absolutely, Casey, please thrust yourself down a giant jump and potentially crash. I mean, how do you sell that to your parents as a 6-year-old? Like, I want to do this.
My dad was saying that, exactly what you said, and then my mom was like, no, I gotta But no, so you start so small. I mean, you start in these little guys, like little jumps that, if you're skiing, if you're downhill alpine skiing at your local ski area, you're finding jumps off the side of runs that are bigger than what you start on as a ski jumper, which I think is a big important thing to say. And then, I mean, the gradual incline and the progression of the sport is so small that it may take, 4, 5, 6, 7 years to get up to these Olympic size hills. So, I mean, granted, you start when you're 6 years old, the progression is going to be a lot slower. You might be jumping those bigger hills when you're 11, 12, 13, 14, kind of depending on how you progress and how well, obviously how you grow and stuff like that changes so much. But for the most part, you're not jumping those big boys until you're old enough to handle it mentally as well. I mean, that's a big thing. So, and then you trust your coach as well. So your coach is never going to send you to a bigger hill unless you're totally ready. And I think that's the most important part of the thing. And how coaches got to sell it to the parents as well. It's like, hey, we're not going to let your kid go off this 40 meter when he's 7 years old. It's going to take years to get up to that. So at least for me, I know I was young, and I think I jumped the biggest Olympic size hill, those K120s that you see when I was around 12, 13 years old. So it took me 6 years still to get up to those, even though 13, still young and dumb enough to not really realize what I was doing. But
still crazy to me that you're going down a jump that size at that age. Do you remember the very first time you got on the 120 jump and what that feeling was like?
I do. Mine was in Lake Placid, New York, and it's pretty intimidating because Lake Placid's jumps are set up right on top of the hill. They're the landing hill where you're actually landing is part of a nice big mountain, but that's scaffolding. I mean, you're 200 feet in the air, just kind of sitting above the clouds up there. So it was it was very intimidating for a kid. But again, I mean, my coach kind of sat me down. Was like, "You're gonna jump this today. Like you're ready." And I think I was. Yeah, it was like New Year's Day. I was 12 years old, and it was pretty special, pretty cool. And
wow.
I still remember it to this day. Yeah, it was sweet. You can find the clip on YouTube.
All right, okay, well, we're going to find that. I was going to say, did you land? I'm guessing if it's on YouTube, you landed, right? Because you've shared it.
Yeah, I was totally fine, and I skied away. It was good. I landed fine.
Perfect, awesome. Which you're sort of mentioning like Placid. You're based in Utah at the moment. I mean, Chicago doesn't really seem as an area which I think of ski jumping. I mean, is it kind of, a big scene going on there sort of in Chicago with a facility that close? Or is it kind of one of the more unique areas in the States where you've got a ski jumping facility so close to a place like Chicago?
I mean, like we said, how do you get into ski jumping? Definitely a sport or location, right? Like, especially being from the Chicagoland area, randomly having a ski jump where I could bike to training every day is very special. I grew up, if I wanted, usually my parents drove me, but if I needed to, or I wanted to, I could rip my bike about 5 miles just to training. So it was all pretty easy. And if you don't have that ability, if you don't live that close to a ski jump, it's pretty tough to get into the sport. And luckily throughout the Midwest of the United States, from Chicago all the way up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and stuff like that, you have, I think about, 15 to 16 active clubs that have a junior program, and you can go out and try the sport. So, you're obviously still a sport or location, but we have the biggest junior programs, in the Midwest, which people think is a little bit backwards when they have places like, Steamboat Springs and Park City, Utah, and Lake Placid. But for some reason, we're quite the little hotbed of ski jumping in the United States, which I take a lot of pride in, especially being from Chicago. And in 2018, 3 of my teammates, 3 of the 4 Olympians were from that home club. So I definitely brag a little bit about that. And, when people ask that question, I don't get defensive, but I definitely, like to make sure that they know that, it's not a gag, right? Like, we have a club where you can go and actually become an Olympian in the Chicagoland area, which I think is it's pretty darn cool.
Which is because there's obviously a large regional aspect to the States in any aspect of life, be it sport, be anything like that. So I guess you've sort of got the Midwest area covered. Lake Placid would be for the East Coasters, and then is sort of Park City mainly the West Coasters kind of are coming from that. I mean, I don't really know if many Californians end up going into ski jumping, but I'm thinking like Utah, Colorado, kind of those sort of areas. Yeah,
you pretty much have Park City, Utah, and Steamboat Springs, Colorado, west. And then you have a lot of ski jumps in New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, Connecticut. There are a fair amount of ski jumps and some big clubs, which is, and they're, in terms of numbers, they have probably the second highest in terms of the region. And that's how we split it in the U.S. at the junior level when you're like competing against people. You got the Central Division, Eastern Division, and then you got like the Rocky Mountain and Intermountain Division. Then you also have a club up in Anchorage, Alaska, which actually is
nice.
Pretty good kids, so that's pretty cool as well. So you got Alaska up there too.
Fantastic. Because it's fascinating. We've had a couple of Canadian ski jumpers on and sort of learnt the fact that they've only really got the one facility now that they can kind of go out in Whistler. Obviously, the Calgary one sort of is there. But it's fascinating to think as an Australian sort of looking to that part of the world where we see a lot more success in winter sports and everything along those lines that you would think these facilities are available. But kind of going back to your point about it's a sport on location, a ski jumping facility isn't something you're just going to go to your local council and go, hey, can we build a ski jumping facility? It's a pretty daunting task to build one. So it's unique in that aspect that you've got them, but obviously they're very unique that it's not like a baseball field where you've got 100 in every single suburb. You've only got, 5 to 10 facilities probably in the entire country.
Yeah, I think in terms of actual numbers, I think we have upwards of maybe mid to high 20s in terms of active clubs in the United States, which is a fair amount. But yeah, I mean, obviously nothing compared, and we don't expect to get the numbers that you get in these classic American sports and stuff like that. And that's okay, but we still have enough clubs and we still have enough interest where we think, where the sport is at now, the results we are achieving now, I think is just hopefully the start of something a little bit bigger. Like, by all means, the skill level I'm at, I hope that in 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it may be, that, kids are looking at me like, oh, look at this scrub. Like he's not, like, I hope that they're just blowing me out of the water and winning World Cups and winning World Championships and stuff like that. Cause that's the end goal of USA Nordic. And I think that's the end goal of me too. If I can't do it, might as well make sure that somebody else can.
In terms of, you mentioned growing up, you were playing American football, baseball, lacrosse. Did you have sort of aspirations to pursue a pro career in any of those sports? Was the Olympics something that kind of got you over the edge when it comes to ski jumping? Sort of, as a kid, what were those dreams to grow up to be?
I think I was just the nicheness and like the how cool I thought I was for ski jumping, I think, and just the aspect of like actually flying through the air and, doing something that nobody else could imagine. Like that was such a big draw for me in the sport and the reason I always loved it. And, but I wasn't bad at American football and lacrosse, but I wasn't big either. So I kind of got knocked. I just knew like, hey, I can play at the middle school, high school level, but I'm never gonna take this anywhere else. And but so slowly throughout high school, I kind of ended up quitting or, taking a step back from some of those sports. And by the end of my of grade 12 or whatever it would be, I was pretty much done with everything but ski jumping and just kind of going all in.
So is this where I ask you in terms of football and baseball? I'm guessing you're a Bears fan, and then does that make it? Which direction do I go in baseball here when it comes to the teams?
I'm a Cubbies fan, so
okay, right. So I'm a Sox fan. I was only going to wear my Sox jersey but again, I'm glad I didn't play it that way. So lucky.
Yeah, I grew up a Cubs fan, so that's kind of where I've been. But I'm not anti-Sox, but obviously the Crosstown Classic, I'm going Cubbies. But like seeing the Sox do well this year is not a bad thing for me, which is gonna make me a non-true Chicagoan. But hey, I just like seeing somebody do good and represent.
I was in the States in 2016. I was watching that game. I was rooting for the Cubs. I was like, I'm not meant to, but I can't not get involved in this. I mean, 26. You're graduating high school. You're watching the Cubs win a World Series. That must be one of the best years of your life.
Oh my goodness! I got to go to the parade. That was probably the coolest thing I've ever done. Is going to the parade. Well, they called it the 6th or 7th largest gathering of human beings ever.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So I was, I was just watching. I was by the WGN building, just hanging out, watching it go down.
Wow. Wasn't it like 4 or 5 million people or something on the streets? Or
it was nuts. It was when I say like the train ride in and out from when I hopped on the metro to get back home. When I say like I couldn't move. Like there was, they were packing those trains. I was amazed that it wasn't top heavy and falling off the tracks. It was pretty ridiculous. And then moving throughout the city was pretty much impossible. I know. We didn't even try to go into Grant Park where they had like the actual stadium set up where they were talking to everybody. But it was nuts. It was pretty cool.
I can't imagine. I mean, did they even have 1 million people on the streets back in 2005 when the Sox won? Like, I mean, it's kind of a bit of a discrepancy there, maybe.
and that's kind of where my allegiance lies. I gotta the whole 110 years or whatever it was I think pushed it over the edge in terms of fandom. But yeah, it was 100%. Pretty cool.
And also, I'll have to ask just quickly. Bulls fan as well then?
Yeah, I like the Bulls. I got a couple Bulls hats I like to wear around.
Right.
But for the most part, I'm definitely the biggest football fan. I definitely watch my Bears lose every week and suffer through that one the most. However, I mean, Bulls and Cubbies. Again, not the biggest hockey fan, but I'll be the anti-Chicagoan where, I'll be a playoff fan with pretty much whichever team. But Bulls are looking good this year, so I'm not.
They are. Time recording this was their best start in 25 years. I'm sort of one of these people as an Australian that in some of the competitions I have to have an American and a Canadian team. So I'm a Bulls fan and a Raptors fan. Okay. And I mean, I grew up in the 90s. You could not be a Bulls fan growing up in the 90s, but I've stuck with them, and it's been interesting. I'm generally the last 10 years been like, okay, the Raptors are doing well. Let's focus on the Raptors. But now all of a sudden it's like, hey, the Bulls, what's going on? I'm not used to this. 2010, Derrick Rose. That was the last time I remember that going well.
I love it, and I love that new. I mean, like we're kind of rallying around. I mean, we're 4-0. It's games just started like 2 weeks ago, but seeing like Ben Caruso, like it's a whole new team for me, right? Like it's guys I've never seen before, but watching like Ben Caruso go and dunk on some people has been pretty funny, and I love to see that just with his bald head and white headband. It's pretty funny, but it's sweet. Hey, we needed it. I mean, in Chicago, there's not a lot of like, we sell at stadiums no matter what. The owners can pretty much do whatever they want and just make bank. So if I'm getting political, I love seeing a good Chicago team and actually somebody put some money into a team and get some players. So it's sweet.
It's one of my favorite cities in the States. My first ever trip, I remember when I was 23, I put that on my list as one of my cities to go to. And I just absolutely loved every aspect of Chicago. I mean, I'm a massive fan of New York, but I mean, Chicago's up there. It's just such a great city. So it's definitely a place that I know a lot of Australians don't often go to. They sort of just do the LA, they do, Vegas and New York and that. But Chicago is a city that I couldn't recommend highly enough for anybody who's listening who hasn't been there. I mean, it's your home. I'm sure you're going to sell it off quite well as well.
There's something about it. You got to be good at, taking some shit for some people. You're not following the rules. You're going to get yelled at, just like New York. It's like anything else. But, as a suburban kid, I go there and get yelled at too. So you got to learn to deal with it. But yeah, I love the city. I go home when I can and, enjoy it and have fun. But it's great.
So what was that decision like then to pick up and move to Utah? Was it kind of just, again, that whole aspect of you pursuing your career now in ski jumping that was the best move for you?
Yeah, I think for me it was a little bit of, I mean, I do go to school at the University of Utah down in Salt Lake City. So I take mostly I do classes online there, and they're great about it. They help me out. They help pretty much most of my teammates seem to go to the University of Utah and have some success there, and they work with them super well. So part of it was that, I started college and stuff like that. But yeah, for the most part, it was like, here's the next 4 years of your life are, going to be committed to ski jumping for sure. Like I already kind of bought in and made sure that it was going to happen. So that was a big part of it, just set up a home base. And, training wise, it was definitely better than Chicago at the level I had gotten to for training. And that was kind of it. It was just like, hey, if this is what it's going to take, this is what it's going to take. And you're going to go do it. Looking back on it, I definitely don't regret it. I love it here. Mountain biking, road biking, skiing, whatever I want to do. I mean, it's here for me. It's not too bad because there's always an escape, right? I've gotten way into trail running, way into whatever, all these mountain sports, and definitely offers a little bit of a training escape, like, hey, I'm still making myself a better ski jumper, still making myself a better athlete, but, offering myself an escape and a way to kind of get out of the, what do I want to call it? As a ski jumper, I definitely have to forget about ski jumping every once in a while. So having a way to do that and just coming out here, and I've found those vices and I found that ways to do that. I think have paid off dividends for sure.
In terms of competition-wise, do you remember that moment when you first make Team USA, when you make USA Nordic, then you're representing your country, and kind of what that moment was like, that you've committed to this sport now, and then all of a sudden you get to wear, the stars and stripes on your uniform and represent your country at a competition?
Yeah, I remember my first ever real, true fist level competition was basically if you compare ski jumping to baseball, we have a World Cup, Continental Cup, and Fist Cup at the world level, and to baseball, World Cup is the MLB, and then you got AAA, AA, and I remember my first ever start on AA, right? It was 2016, summer of like 2015. And I remember going to Switzerland and getting my butt absolutely kicked. I think I got like 60th place or something like that, and just was like, oh, like punch to the gut. It was like, what was that? This is nuts. Thought I was way better than this, but I think that was the first time I ever felt like, oh, I'm not like, because I'd always been Casey Larson, like one of the better kids in the country. I'd always been like fighting for medals at like junior world championships and stuff like that, and I'd always thought of myself as a pretty good ski jumper, and then you go and get absolutely walloped by some Europeans, and you're like, there's a lot left of the sport, obviously. So I remember just kind of after that being like, all right, well, it's not make or break at all. You have all these years to kind of start getting better and kind of start improving. And I think the next year I had some pretty great results. And after that summer, that winter, I went into the Youth Olympic Games in Lillehammer, Norway in 2016. And that was pretty sweet. It was a super small field. They only brought like one kid from each country. So I was only competing against 18 people. But I think I got sixth, which I ended up being super proud of. I remember like that was my first ever competition where I actually like felt a little fire in the belly, where I was like, oh, I have a chance, Maybe it was the smaller field. Maybe it was just like the cool, basically being at a smaller version of the Olympics was pretty sweet. So I think I got sixth there, and I was really proud of that. And then the next year I started scoring on the Continental Cup circuit and stuff like that. And I started, gaining some confidence on the lower levels, not quite, got called up to the majors a few times, got called up to World Cup a few times, and World Championships. I went to World Championships in 2017. And every time I would go up to World Cup, it was a great learning experience. You kind of got your feet underneath you, figured it out. And every time you went, you got less and less nervous. But then that next year it was kind of game on. Going to the Olympics and everything was pretty sweet. But definitely at that age, at 19, especially the ski jumper, where it's a sport of maturity. It's a sport of kind of like golf in the sense that sometimes the longer you play, the better you're going to get. So you'll see athletes really hit their strides in their 30s and stuff like that. So at 19, to be able to go to the Olympics and like just experience the whole thing, the whole 9 yards, and be able to call myself an Olympian is pretty cool. And B, hopefully coming up in 2022, it won't just be like, oh, Casey, good job for having like, getting 35th place. At this point we're focused enough and we're working hard enough where it's gunning for something a little bit better.
Which I want to talk to you about the Youth Olympics, because I always love learning about that experience because they're such a unique and fascinating event. Did that help prep you for what was to come in Pyeongchang? You mentioned, it's basically a mini version of the Olympics, but it's something that as a multi-sport event, you can prepare for things like village life and even, I guess, experiencing other sports that maybe you're not sort of generally exposed to when you're competing out there in World Cup. So, did that help sort of the Pyeongchang experience eventually, do you think?
I don't know. I think so. I think just competing on any stage, like the more competitions you get under your belt, no matter the caliber is super important. And Lillehammer was super cool because it was like, for me that season, it was the only thing that mattered. It was like it was the goal of the entire season was to get there and qualify for that and kind of go in terms of, and just kind of represent my country on a much smaller level. But yeah, I think so. I think, actually, I think the weirdest thing that I'm going to say is to have people care about you that much for that short amount of time is very similar to the Olympics. Like here you are, you have a bunch of people that, they're kind of invested in you for this period of time. And as a normal ski jumper, you kind of have your coach and you have your wax tech or your own wax tech or whatever. Most of the season, everything's the same. And then every time you go to the Olympics or World Championships, you have a few more people caring about you. And I think that's something that shocks a lot of athletes. And I think it's a big reason you see a lot of, if we get into the kind of the other side of things, I think it's a big reason that you see a lot of like post-Olympic blues and stuff like that. Cause like you're brought up on this pedestal and then for some reason right after you just kind of get let down and you got to go back to your normal life in a way. And I think even feeling that in 2016 kind of helped prepare me for what that was going to be like. There's at least one competition every year where something like that happens. For ski jumping, it's like we have a world championship or an Olympics every single year. So there's always that like peak of every season where you want to be your best and are trying to be your best. And there's always a little bit of a letdown after that.
Does that help in terms of getting yourself ready every year? Whereas, say, some other sports where the Olympics is the peak, and of course they're every 4 years, it's a little bit different. So, having that yearly thing to look towards, does it help kind of get you ready for an Olympics, if that makes sense?
I think so. I think for the most part, I mean, even if I'm looking forward to this season, my focus is not even, other than when I get to talk to people like you or get to do some stuff with the Olympics, just because that is an Olympic year. For right now, I mean, my focus is on Thanksgiving weekend and, November 25th, which is for a month from now. It's my first competition of the year. And from that point on until the Olympics, it's World Cup season. It's just a normal season for me. So thankfully, I'm already looking okay in terms of qualification for the Olympics. So barring anything, knock on wood or whatever it may be, I'm looking okay. So I don't need to focus on qualifying right now. I need to focus on making sure that I have my best season to date. I've that's been my big thing all summer, is just making sure that this season, I'm training at my best and competing at my best so that I can, maintain and maybe in February even come up a little bit.
So is that, you mentioning progression kind of as you're going through the sport, kind of focusing on that, so that if you've basically got in the back of your mind that, look, I'm pretty much going to the Olympics, it's about then setting myself a target of getting to the Olympics, and I want to finish in top 20. I want a medal. I want to, whatever that goal may be. Is that kind of where you can mentally prepare yourself a little bit differently to maybe what you did back in 2018?
Totally. I think the struggle of actually qualifying in 2018, what I had to do all winter long just to make sure I went was really, really emotionally draining. And once it happened, it was almost like the Olympics were the reward. They weren't the goal. The goal was qualifying. And then once I got there, I was just kind of like, whoa, what's going on? Whereas now it's like, if I'm going to go to represent my country and do the best I can. And obviously very selfishly, I just want to do as good as I can. I want to be able to brag to myself for the rest of my life that, hey, I went to the Olympics and I had my best competition. Even if I don't win, it's like, hey, I had put down my best jumps that I did all season. And that was my goal, is just to make sure that I went into Beijing as fit mentally and physically as I could be.
In terms of just outside of the competition aspect in 2018, just the Olympic experiences themselves, I mean, do you soak that up when you're there in Pyeongchang? I mean, do you get to do the opening, closing ceremonies, things like that, and then maybe sort of, back in the normal times when we could go and watch other sports, were you kind of soaking all that up around it, or were you so focused on your competition that you weren't really able to experience those things?
Oh, I definitely enjoyed it. And I was told, hey, this is your first Olympics, so there's no pressure on your back. For the most part, I focus on my competitions, but what was nice is we had almost 6 days after our competitions, that we decided to stay for the closing ceremonies. So after that was said and done, I mean, I just had an absolute blast. We went to watch the hockey games, watch the curling events, slopestyle, whatever it was, whatever I could get to, I went to. So I think that was super important. It was I definitely enjoyed my Olympic experience, and it looks like I'm really glad I did, because this year, maybe we go to the opening ceremonies, but it's looking like we're going to be kind of shipped out right after, which I totally understand. I totally support. So for the most part, I'm glad I did that in 2018. I was glad, somebody was looking out for me and was just like, hey, enjoy it while you can, because, it's definitely worth it. So looking into 2022, it's definitely going to be much more of a business trip, but you gotta enjoy the experience. I love meeting different athletes. We're just stuck with the same, 5 dudes all winter long most of the time. So being able to go and, go see another winter athlete that's, 6'3" and 250 pounds instead of my, 5'10", 140 pounds is pretty cool to meet somebody that much different, and just with that different goals and doing that much different of a sport. But yet here we are at the same place. I think that was pretty sweet. That was pretty cool.
In terms of you saying before about you were sort of told it's your first Olympics, a bit different. I love that sort of phrase you just used there. Now Beijing's more of a business trip, but in terms of your performances, so 39th in the normal hill, and then ultimately 53rd in the large hill. Were you satisfied with those performances? Had you set yourself a different goal? Kind of how did you leave feeling? And I should have mentioned 9th in the team event, of course, too. You were part of that as well.
Yeah, I think my biggest regret is not really going in with these big, like I said, kind of just being relieved I was going and relieved that I qualified. I think my biggest regret is when I got there, not really I obviously wanted to put down my best jumps and do as good as I could, but I think mentally I could have done a better job. And that's again the learning experience, kind of not going through the motions in the sense of like, really just, I think I could have had better goals. I think I could have, been like, hey, no, I want to get top 30. Like, or I think I could have, and then not even so just think about the numbers. I think I could have just simply had better jumps. I don't think I went there and had the best jumps of the season. And I don't think I showed my best self at the Olympics, which is a shame and I'm bummed about. But again, being 19 years old, just kind of going there for the first time, I think that was a great lesson to learn. And I think I'm proud of myself for taking that away from it. And, 3.5 years later here, I know that when I get to the Olympics, not if, but when, in my head, I got to think that way, that I do the opposite of that. I say like, hey, I know where my best jumps can land me, whether that be top 20, top 10, top 5, who knows. But let's just make sure that I am in control of my own body and myself, that I actually go out and do that rather than, let those decisions sometimes be made for me by the wind or by the conditions or just how I feel that day. Let's make sure that I'm mentally ready to go.
In terms of the normal and large hill, is it a sport in which it pays to specialize in one, or because there may be somewhat similar that you can easily specialize in both?
On the World Cup circuit, we mostly jump large hills. We'll jump a few normal hills throughout the year, but for the most part, we're on large hills. So I'd say every athlete is kind of specialized on large hills. That's what we train on the most. That's like kind of what we're prepared for every weekend. That normal hill is a little bit smaller, but for the most part, like what I like to say is, if you're a good ski jumper, you're going to go far no matter if you're on a K70, K90, or K120. Like if you're on something smaller than a normal hill, you're going to be going just as far compared to everybody else that you would be on any hill. It's a sport of technique, so you kind of go with it like that. It's definitely you're jumping the same on every hill. So I'd say no, nobody really specializes on either. I'd say you train mostly on a large hill. That's what I'm prepared for every season. However, like you said, I kind of like the normal hills. Sometimes I'm pretty strong. I think I can jump pretty high. So sometimes when I get to a normal hill, I'm a little bit cockier. I got a little bit more swag going into it. But for the most part, no. I'd say if you're a good ski jumper, it don't matter the hill.
And besides the obvious question of one being bigger, one being smaller, is it also a speed aspect to it too, that because it's a larger hill, you're able to pick up more speed, and kind of, is that why you see longer distances in the larger hill than obviously we do in the normal hill?
Yeah, you definitely get more speed down the in-run. Like in that first part of the ski jump, you definitely get more speed on a larger hill. And then obviously it's just designed, the physics of it, however geometrically how it was designed or whatever it may be is kind of made for you to go a little bit farther. It's a little bit, just a little bit longer landing hill. However, but no, it doesn't feel that much different. Like, especially in the in-run, like when you get in the air, sure, immediately you're not going to be going as far as you would on a big hill, but the in-run feels very similar on pretty much every hill, especially at the Olympics when the hills are right next to each other and they were designed at the same time, built at the same time. So I end up usually feeling pretty similar, except for one just being a little bit less airtime. What
speed are you picking up when you're going down one of those slopes?
On the World Cup on a large hill, you're going about 85, anywhere between 85 and 90 kilometers an hour, depending on the hill, depending on how it was designed, and the wind speed and stuff like that.
That's incredible. Wow. And I mean, that feeling, like I always love learning about feelings in sport, but like going down a jump that speed, flying for 6-7 seconds and then nailing the perfect, like, I mean, that must be such a sensation that you probably still, after thousands of jump in your career, Case, you probably still never get sick of.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's such a drug for me at this point. Like, if I don't get to jump every once in a while, I go pretty nuts. But yeah, I mean, every jump's so much different to me, which is awesome. Like everything, even if I'm on the same hill, everything's a new experience. So for the most part, I mean, I just absolutely adore ski jumping and wouldn't trade it for the world. So yeah, you're talking to like the biggest fanboy of the sport in the world. So I mean, every hill I show up to, everything I like to do, even if I'm not having the best day, I mean, it's still ski jumping. It's still pretty much no matter how far I go, and even if I'm mad, I know that the common onlooker is like, oh wow, that was crazy cool. Like, so I mean, I cannot complain. People still think I'm pretty cool and crazy, so I like to remember that every once in a while.
That's the main thing. I mean, look, as an Australian who barely gets to see the sport until an Olympics happens, we've never had an Australian represent the country at an Olympics. I don't even know if we've ever had an Australian at a World Cup. I have no idea. But during Pyeongchang, every night I was basically up to 2 o'clock in the morning watching it. And my co-host and I, Jared, we would literally message each other. Are you up at 2 o'clock watching ski jumping? Yes. This sport is amazing. We need to talk about this more.
It is a pretty cool one. I mean, it's nuts. And I think TV especially does a really good job of like making us look a little bit crazier than we are, because the physics of it is we're actually, flying. When we're flying through the air, what we're doing is we're kind of on ground effect. So if you've ever been in an airplane, you're coming into land, when you're coming in super, super fast and then you all of a sudden kind of stall right before you touch down, what's helping you land really softly is the ground effect underneath those wings. And that's actually how we kind of glide over the ground. We're never that high. We're maybe between 5 and 10 feet off the ground, just so we can, and then we're looking like a flying squirrel in the air if you've ever watched videos. So we're just kind of cruising on that ground effect, and that's how we're able to put it down so far, and that's how we're able to like land so softly and gracefully, which is wild to some people. But then if you watch a video of maybe a younger kid or somebody who's not quite as good as the sport, they're going to be in much less of an aerodynamic position, go a lot less far, and actually land harder. So when you're at that Olympic level and it makes it look so easy, there's a reason for that, and it's usually just physics and aerodynamics, and we're able to just kind of propel ourselves pretty quickly down the hill and land pretty easy.
Because I can imagine there's always science going into the sport as well. I mean, I remember sort of in the late 2000s when technology in swimming suits became such a thing that they obviously had to ban the suits because the world records were getting smashed, but like nothing else between. But we learn a little bit with some of our other guests about the weird, quirky rules that kind of relate to the sport. I think the chicken wire and the crotch and all that kind of stuff. But like, is it a sport that as an athlete you can talk to scientists and people involved in suit preparation and kind of the aerodynamic side of things, that you can look at ways to gain an advantage that obviously remain within the confines of the rules?
Yeah, and those confines of the rules are always like ebbing and flowing, right? So it's always an interesting question, and like an educated question too, because some people definitely don't think about that. But yeah, I mean, equipment-wise, since Salt Lake in 2002, since my ski jumps that I train on were used, so much stuff has happened. For the most part, these suit rules that have come into play, where you can only have about 3 centimeters of play on your suit, is probably the biggest one. That just allows, like I kind of use the flying squirrel, and you think about those wingsuits, we're not allowed to have that, obviously. They keep that very, very controlled. And then I would say the other biggest one is kind of in 2010, I'd say is kind of when it broke through, is our heels can come off the ski. They always have been able to. But usually we used to have, back in the day, like back when I started, we used to have cords that would stop us. Right. But now we actually have metal bars that are twisted in so that when they come up to you, your skis actually flatten.
Wow.
And that just creates a little bit more surface area and allows you to be a little bit faster. So that's kind of one of the cooler kind of big design changes that you see absolutely that just took over the sport immediately and everybody switched to. So that's definitely the biggest thing since then. But for the most part, I mean, it's all about aerodynamics. We do a lot of, probably once every couple of years. The kind of the lessons that you learn in a wind tunnel carry on for quite a while. So we'll go to a wind tunnel. I know there's a cool one in Sweden where the wind actually comes from the bottom, so you can really feel like you're actually ski jumping in it. So a lot of teams will go there once every, probably biannually or something like that, just to kind of recheck in. I went last year. It was amazing, and you do learn a lot. I mean, you get to see all these numbers and kind of put a little bit of science to how you naturally fly, which is pretty cool, because I've always just kind of done what my body's told me to do in the air. And then I'm just lucky enough where that kind of worked in the wind tunnel, and then you feel more confident after that.
Do you ever wish, or is there moments where you can get together with somebody and put together that if rules didn't apply in ski jumping, you could wear the wingsuit, you could do this, you could do that, and just see how far you could go? Because I'm a Formula One fan, and I know some of the designers have often just created a concept car for shits and giggles. Basically, like, okay, if there were no rules, this is what we could achieve in the sport. Is that something that has been looked at and see how far you could go and keep flying, basically?
I think so, and I think that they try and limit that, especially like not a lot of people. I've seen somebody jump in a wingsuit. There's also, again, these are some funny YouTube lookups for sure. Just like wingsuit ski jumping, it's happened. People have done it, but for the most part, I'd say personally I haven't. I just kind of there's pretty obvious, pretty much more surface area is better, and the FIS, the International Federation of Skiing, limits us quite a bit. I mean, we have a really nice thick rule book compared to some sports, and we have to try and make our suits in the confines of that. But stretching the rules a little bit here and there, who knows? Maybe for a certain competition here or there, you do try and create a little bit more surface area, whether it be in the armpits or the crotch or somewhere. And then I mean that exponentially can increase the lift you get. So that being said, you don't want too little lift, you don't want too much lift, because it can get dangerous, and we know that. So you're always trying to go as far as you can, but you got to be smart about it too.
Which I love this aspect. You mentioned the crotch. I know we had one of our guests on, and it was sort of a case of, is this a sport where it naturally gifts the men who are maybe a little bit more gifted in certain areas, or is it a case of you've got to like adjust it in a way that you can't have more than that 3 centimeters that you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak.
It's too difficult, Ben. You wouldn't understand it. It's hilarious that way.
Pretty much, once you become an adult, you get measured once a year, or you get measured kind of when you think you're done growing. You're allowed to get measured up until I think you're 21 every year, just because obviously you're growing. Who knows the growth spurts and the growth patterns, but once you're an adult, according to FIS, you get measured, and then those are your measurements. They take your arm measurement, they take your crotch measurement, they take your height, and those are your measurements forever. And that's kind of how they patrol you. And that's, if they ever pull you into equipment control, they're gonna disqualify you or something like that based on that previous measurement you might have took 3-4 years ago. But you always have that in the back of your head. Your suits are designed for you to be able to pull those up just to that perfect height, and then usually there's a little bit of play, so you can get a little bit lower before you jump, but for the most part they're always around there. And for me, so that means I'm 100 and according to FIS, I'm 179 centimeters tall. I'm my arm measurement is 56 and my crotch is 77. So those are like my proportions that my suit has to fit to.
That's a good thing to put on like a Tinder bio, crotch 77 centimeters. But is that sort of why you mentioning before about sort of peaking at a later age? Because I can imagine, as you're saying, sort of as a younger athlete, you're still growing. So therefore you can't necessarily get to a point where that in the back of your mind, you might be a different, height or crotch length or anything along those lines. So is that kind of where it pays off later on when you get older, that's where you peak a little bit differently?
I'd say I've watched friends have growth spurts and have like kind of messed with them quite a bit, some teammates. But I was lucky enough to never have a growth spurt. I was just kind of the kid who like every year you'd be a little bit taller. It would just kind of grow. And then I stopped growing, senior year, grade 12 or something like that. And I was pretty much 180, like 180, 181, kind of where I'd measure in at most of the time. And I've kind of been there. And it was nice for my ski jumping because I was ski jumping enough where I never had to deal with any big body changes or anything like that. So I'd say, like if you can, I mean, I was lucky in that sense. I mean, but most athletes, even if they do have a massive growth spurt, figure it out pretty quickly. I mean, it might take them a little bit, but I've seen those kids that were great ski jumpers when they were 5 foot tall, and then all of a sudden they're like 6'1", and they figure it out eventually. It only takes some time, but yeah.
You mentioned some of the sports you were playing growing up, the team aspect of it. So obviously there is team events in ski jumping. You were part of the team event in Pyeongchang, and there's now a mixed event coming into Beijing. What's that like in such a individual-based sport to all of a sudden be in a team environment? And what sort of tactics can you have in a team ski jumping event at a major tournament?
I'd say the team event aspect of it, like how we kind of operate, isn't super crazy. I mean, it's almost, for me at least, a little bit more lighthearted of a competition. Usually you can rely on those teammates, but for the most part, like we're living with our teammates most of the time. Like when I'm in Europe, I would live with my teammates. We train with our teammates. So we're not, even though you're obviously trying to kick their butt every competition, you're never against each other. You're never rooting against somebody. So that being said, like the team event just kind of operates pretty similar to a regular competition, but you're able to like have a little bit more fun in the sense of like root on those people rather than, sometimes being a little angry when your teammate that you live with gets you, you know what I mean? You can root for his really far jump. And then the mixed team event's super cool because sometimes we're out of touch with the female team and stuff like that. But obviously in World Championships we have had some mixed team competitions since 2017, or sorry, even before that. So I think even Prodazzo or Falun in 2015 World Championships might have been the first mixed team. So for a long time we've had that dynamic, and it's always a fun one. But then other than that, I mean, mixed team events are great. I love them. And I want to do more of them for the most part. I mean, they're a great addition to any weekend.
I always love learning in sports if there's a level of sledging, bit of sass going on between the competitors. Is ski jumping one that kind of, as you're walking past a competitor, hey, Mr. Norway, you suck, and then just kind of keep on walking or something like that?
I love trash talking. I remember like playing team sports, man. You got to do a lot of it, and it was always like after the game, you could always kind of just like let it go. You always shook hands at the end of the game, but in ski jumping, it's a pretty respectful dynamic. You're never really messing with anybody else, but sometimes I wish I could trash talk a little bit. It's pretty fun. But,
I was going to say, are there some, like, I mean, you can name names if you really want to, Casey, but like, are there some that you go like, God, I just hate that guy?
No, I mean, hey, anybody that's better than me and is on the World Cup circuit and, is competing against me on a weekly basis shares the same experience as me. I mean, they're slugging it out from November until March, so they get it. And they know how hard it can be. They know how those ebbs and flows of ski jumping can go, and how one weekend you can be at the top of the world and the next weekend you can barely be qualifying. So for the most part, no, I don't hate any ski jumper. And if somebody's angry at me or doesn't give me the time of day, you probably know how they're doing, and if they're not having a good week, you just kind of know.
We like to close out with a series of fun sort of get to know you questions. Just before I get to those, a couple of quick questions. I love my stats. I'm a stats man, and I always like to learn a little bit about country's history in a certain sport, particularly when I'm outside of that country. Now, I digged around. I wanted to see, had the States ever won a medal in ski jumping? And I learnt that you have won in 1924, a bronze from Anders Haugen. So on that, how close are the States to breaking this? This is nearly 100-year drought, Casey, without a medal in the sport. Are we close?
I might, maybe I'll wait till 2020. What would it be? 2026, just so I can be like the Cubs. But for the most part, no. I think we got a fourth place in in Sarajevo. So since then, no, we've kind of been struggling to kind of get back to that point, and I'm not going to try and predict the future, but I mean it's looking good. I mean we got a really young team. So for the next, I'm 22 and I'm one of the old guys, and Kevin Bickner, one of my teammates, he's 24, so he's the oldest one on the team. So I mean you can imagine everybody else is younger, and we're really just looking forward to kind of keeping the sport alive and making sure that, like I said, 2026, or 2030, and there's so much time that as an athlete, my career could extend to that point. So I'm not going to, say that, hey, I'm going to be the best in the world this winter, but at the same time, that doesn't mean in 4 years I won't be, and my teammates won't be. So yeah, I think we're close enough that hopefully in the next couple ones we'll get there.
What would that mean to the sport? Because again, as an outsider, I look at the US as this, massive Olympic country that dominates in every single sport, but there are obviously sports where kind of, you have something like this where you haven't won a medal. I mean, I look at curling from 2018 when the US won the gold, how big that has obviously been for the sport in that country. But what would even just any color medal mean to the sport, do you think, kind of moving forward?
It means so much. I mean, we aren't, right now, USA Nordic as an organization, we aren't supported by US Ski Team. We aren't supported by the US Olympic Committee right now. We don't get any government funding. So we're kind of making everything making everything happen ourselves. And as athletes, that puts a lot of strain on us because the better the results, the more we get. So kind of looking forward, it's super important to us just to keep the sport alive and, keep kids wanting to come out and try this wacky niche sport in the United States. That's, one of the biggest winter sports out in Europe. I mean, we fill up stadiums 40,000 strong before COVID. So for me as an athlete, I just want to show how cool the sport can be to the United States. And I think if an Olympic medal is going to do that, that's what we got to do.
One thing I want to quickly ask you though too, I believe you collect socks. Tell me about this. Is this a thing, and how did this begin?
I tried to think hey, what's the dumbest or what's the weirdest, or not weirdest. I just started getting a lot of socks, and I'm not a big gift asker, right? So when somebody's hey, what do you want for your birthday? I don't like my birthday, and my birthday's super close to Christmas, so I end up just getting this month of December where I just get crammed and feel really weird. So I just be give me socks, just give me socks. I'm a size 9 US, just give me socks, and that's what I get. I get a lot of socks. So people, it's not me being creative, it's other people being creative with my gifts. So.
Which is, it's one of those gifts that you sort of always end up getting, right? So why not make that fun?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's been. It's been great.
So how many socks do you have, and what's sort of the best pair that your favorite pair, I guess, you have?
I have this pair of Wonder Woman. I'll grab them. Hold on. Give me a second.
Oh, okay. I like the visual aspect. This works.
It all started with the pair of socks that looked a lot like this, and then we bought them I actually bought these ones at a shop in Colorado, and I wore them all the time. And they're a pair of Wonder Woman socks. They're just Wonder Woman bike socks. They're
nice.
Just that's what they are. And then I wore a hole in them pretty quickly, and then I bought the same pair of socks and have officially worn a hole in these ones. So they're
wow.
If he wants to send me some Soul Cycle Wonder Woman socks, I'd love it.
There you go. What was that, size 9 US? Was that the correct one there? Yep. Okay. Yep. Just make sure to clarify that if people do want to send them to you, essentially. So kind of go the way. Is it, when you go to competitions, so when you're in Slovenia, you're in Germany, is it always a case of, I'm going to get a pair of Slovenian socks to kind of add to the collection?
No, because I'm pretty, I don't say I buy them as souvenirs too much. I just gather them. I just buy a cool pair of socks when I see them, and that's about it.
Well, there you go. And this is where I've got to say then, you are going for the wrong baseball team. You should be going for the socks. Come on, it fits in perfectly.
I'm sorry.
As I said, we like to close out with some get-to-know-you style questions. So these questions are based on a Team Canada questionnaire they gave their athletes ahead of Rio and Pyeongchang. And some interesting ones here. I always like to try and base these off an athlete from the same sport, but sadly Team Canada didn't put these to any ski jumpers back in Pyeongchang, or if they did, they didn't sadly publish them. So I've gone with, of course, a hockey player. It's Canada. So Laura Stacey is the questionnaire that I'm basing these off. So I'll start off with, your favourite ever Olympic moment is?
I'd say probably the Miracle on Ice back in Lake Placid. I just not a huge hockey fan, but just the underdog story. And I've been to Lake Placid. I go to Lake Placid a lot. They got some great ski jumps there, so we get to go to the ice rink and see the history. So learning about that, watching the movie, I like that one.
And I can imagine, I remember when I went to Salt Lake and I was take me to the stadium, what was it, Rice-Eccles Stadium there at the university. And I remember seeing the cauldron kind of the guys obviously lit. So going to the university and having that there, you've got that weird connection sort of to that history as well.
Yep.
Kind of works out that way as well. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I'd like to if I could have some gills and just be able to swim underwater, I feel like that'd be pretty sweet. I like swimming. I like being in the water. So, I grew up with a cabin on a lake, so I definitely enjoy the water and being around that. So, nice. I wouldn't choose to fly because I can already do that, thankfully. So,
yes, kind of already ticked that off the bucket list. Now, based on your answer you just gave, I might guess an answer for this one, but I could be wrong. Your favorite sports movie is?
Yeah, obviously, Miracle on Ice is great. Yeah, I'd say that one. It's iconic. It's also niche enough where maybe people don't know about it, and I feel cool. But yeah, I'd say that. Yeah. I've got
to ask, Eddie the Eagle, are we a fan or?
Oh, we are a fan. Great for the sport. Absolutely fantastic. But like anything, if you're a professional in a sport that has a movie, you probably hate that movie just for the sake of some things aren't right, some things don't work out, some things don't look right. that you would never be able to know, the public would never be able to know. But like, there's some stuff in Eddie the Eagle where I'm just like, he's using the wrong skis. He's using the wrong equipment. That's not time accurate. This isn't date. This isn't working out. So that's the only reason. Great acting, great. It literally brought kids to the club. Like, it brought kids into the sport. So if anything does that, you can't complain.
I'm literally watching there going, Hugh Jackman's not American. He's not sounding correct. I'm not liking this accent. What's he doing? Which, if you want to compare it, though, James Bond did ski jumping in For Your Eyes Only. So, you know, any sport that James Bond can do, that's also a positive.
Yeah, true. I feel pretty good about that, at least.
Yeah, always tick that one off there. Your funniest childhood memory is?
Oh, I don't know. My sister was known for eating worms, so I always have memories of her just digging through the dirt. But
wait, was this like the thing? This wasn't just like, as a brother, you're going, go eat some worms. She was just like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. I'm hungry. Let's dig up some worms.
No, there's just this iconic. She didn't actually eat worms, but she loved worms. And like, again, out on the cabin on the lake, like, we'd be fishing, and then instead of her fishing, she'd just be digging through the worm box, right? And that's all I remember, just that. And then there's a picture of her just with her hand, just a bunch of worms.
Wow. Okay then. Whatever floats your boat. Fair enough. Your favorite pump up song is? London
Bridge by Fergie, or by Black Eyed
Peas.
Yeah.
Great song. Haven't heard that in years, actually. That's
a good one.
That's a very good song. That whole album, was that the Duchess album, I think, wasn't it?
I think so. It recently just came across, like, you know, just I heard it somewhere, and then I immediately, actually pretty recently, had to add that to the gym playlist.
Nice. I like it. Is it. And also, like, when you're in the preparation, you're getting ready to go up the hill, are you putting on the AirPods? Are you kind of pumping yourself up?
Personally, I don't. I like to stay. I mean, I usually, ski jumping is a large undertaking for me personally. Like, mentally, you got to be in the right headspace. And for me, sometimes I like to make sure I take the headphones off and kind of be aware of where I am. And I usually warm up without headphones. I usually stretch without headphones and get ready for some reason. But that morning or the workout before, that's kind of like when I get overly focused and stuff like that. And then I get to the hill and try and keep it light, keep it easy.
Which, I mean, you likened it sort of earlier to golf in some aspects, but it's not a sport which I kind of relate to maybe getting the crowd involved for the adrenaline. It's not like a field event at track and field where if you're about to do a long jump, you're putting the arms up clapping. Like, I mean, is it that silence aspect at the top where you need to be focusing that you couldn't have somebody going like, come on, get involved, let's cheer me on as I'm jumping down? Totally.
I mean, you can, the crowd's pretty cool, and you go to these places with these massive crowds, but for the most part now, you're pretty focused in, and I'm definitely not like trying to pump with the crowd because we're far away from the crowd. We're way up at the top of that jump. I mean, I can obviously hear them, but we're definitely not, in it,
But that landing though, if you nail a jump and you get the crowd kind of the adrenaline pumping through, I can imagine that's a pretty special feeling.
Oh, it's sweet. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's good.
In terms of TV shows, Casey, what was the most recent TV show that you binge watched?
I'm like a big fan of the classics, like, to me, classic sitcoms of like my generation. Like, I mean, I watched The Office, great one. New Girl, watch that, it's a great one. But the most recent one I've binge watched. I think. Not a lot. I mean, I'm a pretty busy guy, and I got a job. I don't binge watch much, but I'm a big fan of You, and they just came out the new season, so I've kind of been chugging through that slowly here. So I'd say You. I'd say that's the big one. Great show on Netflix, but yeah, I'd say I love the classics and kind of stayed on that track.
So when you say The Office, US version, I mean, are you a fan of the UK version?
So I've watched the UK version, loved it, but I will say just the sheer amount of content that the US version ones, I say that's definitely considered binge watching. Whereas it's 3 seasons or 3 parts, I'd say, for the 2 or 3 parts.
Yeah, at least 1 or 2, I think. Yeah, seasons. And then US got about 9 seasons, 8, 9.
I mean, too many seasons, arguably, but yeah.
In terms of foods, I like this version of it. Rather than your favorite food, what are your least favorite foods?
I'm a human vacuum. I can pretty much do whatever you put in front of me. I mean, literally, like you think there's some foods I won't eat. I probably would.
Worms? Have you ever eaten the worms?
Never eaten worms. All right, never eaten worms. That's probably the big line. But for the most part, yeah, no, I like foods. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I like
Just
every
anything.
vegetable I've ever tried. I don't know.
Wow.
Maybe if you gave
Okay.
me some obscure foods, I could say definitely not. But
Have you tried Vegemite before?
never tried Vegemite. But I've
That
heard it's
might.
just kind of like this beautiful saltiness on top of some bread. If you mix it with some butter, it can be okay.
Yeah, look, it's as an Australian, I think the reason why I've lived overseas so much is because I get deported by saying I actually don't like Vegemite. But the thing I will say, if you ever do try it, it's not Nutella. So I think a lot of people look at it and go, "Oh, it's Nutella," so they just scoop it on and like heap it on a cracker or bread, but very thinly on it with some butter. It's not too bad. Yeah,
Okay.
it is salty though. It is
Yeah.
very, very salty. So
I
if you're
think I
into
could get
that,
behind it. I think I
yeah.
could get behind it for some reason. So we
Go
could
for it.
do that.
Is there a ski jumping food, like a sort of a food that helps you in ski jumping at all?
No, I mean the biggest thing is fat doesn't fly, so you got to kind of keep that in mind. You definitely the skinnier body types, and if you are skinnier, you're gonna go a little bit farther. So you don't need calorie count. You gotta be careful of that stuff. But for the most part, nah, just eat clean. Like any athlete, like you got to follow a diet, and you gotta make sure you're feeling good. So clean foods. I do a lot of like brown rice with veggies, and make little tacos out of that or whatever it may be. But a normal dinner pretty much just looks like your classic healthy plate, right? Like some protein. I do tend to veer towards more of the plant-based stuff. Don't have any. I don't consider myself a vegan or a vegetarian, but I do prefer the veggie proteins and stuff like that. So I'll do tofu, veggies, and rice, and call it good.
Which then, after you compete in Pyeongchang, do you allow yourself a moment to go to the village? And I don't know if McDonald's was still a part of the village back then, but just go, okay, fat doesn't fly, but right now I've already flown, so fuck it, just load me up with the Big Macs.
Yeah, no, I definitely did not. I definitely went to the McDonald's. We'll leave it at that.
Which, as we've heard in Tokyo, no longer a thing. So you might not have them in Beijing. So it's
Yeah,
sad. There's no free Maccas.
I have a season after the Olympics. We go until March 28th. So that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, fat doesn't fly. I like that. I like that saying. Your favorite chip flavor is
My favorite what? Chip flavor?
chip flavor. Yeah,
Ode to my Canadian friends. I love ketchup chips.
nice.
We train a lot with the Canadians, so I've definitely gotten the opportunity to try some of those. But sour cream and onion.
Oh yeah.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, we're getting that answer a bit recently. I like it. That's a very good flavor. If you weren't an athlete, what would you be?
I've been thinking about this a lot recently. There's got to be a life after sport, and I'm going to have to tackle that at some point. But I'm not sure. I mean, hey, I love working with kids. Every time I get the opportunity to coach, I love doing that. I've been injured a few times in the past couple of years, so I always like to give back to the sport. So that being said, definitely would not. If sport wasn't a thing, if I would have gone to college, I probably would have found myself down a helping path, whether that be teaching or maybe social work or something like that.
Fantastic. Your favorite vacation spot is?
Oh man, I'm unoriginal, but I do love skiing. So sometimes instead of taking a postseason vacation, I usually just stay home in Park City and go skiing for a couple of days and call that my vacation. But I do want to learn how to surf soon, so maybe I'll take a trip down to Mexico if the bank account allows it. But yeah, I mean, I guess I don't go places warm too often. I kind of stay in the snow.
Kind of feel what that's like. So when you're skiing, are you downhill? Are you mixing a bit of the cross country? Maybe looking at the Nordic combined one day, kind of to look at that.
Well, I did Nordic combined, but then I kept starting in first and finishing in last. So I got the hints. But for the most part now, I usually just downhill ski. Just Utah has a little bit too much of it, so too much to pick from. So I get to run the gamut out here at the resorts.
Perfect. Final question for you, Casey. What's something that people usually describe you as?
Oh man, I don't know. It's a tough one, I guess. Super attractive. Is that a good answer?
That works, of course. Yeah,
No,
absolutely. 77 centimeter crotch. It's in there,
Yeah. I don't know. I hope that people think of me as in the happy-go-lucky sense of things. I definitely like to. Obviously, I'm a competitor when I'm on the hill, when I'm skiing, when I'm an athlete. I definitely don't like to lose. But off the hill, I like to think of myself as a pretty nice guy and can kind of definitely have some fun.
That works. I like it. Case, before we let you go, if people want to stay up to date with you, kind of follow your journey through to Beijing and beyond, where can people find you? Social media, places like that?
I have a Facebook athlete page. Feel free to like that. Just Casey Larson. But not on that a ton, but definitely I love Twitter. That's the stupid stuff, Casey16 Larson. And then my Instagram is where you're going to find all the big stuff, all the soppy stuff. That's just at Casey Larson. And yeah, I like to keep everybody up to date, at least with stories a lot. Posting can be a little tough, especially just sometimes getting those posts out can be tough. But Twitter's, I usually have some pretty good content, some pretty stupid stuff just getting tossed out there, and then Instagram.
Perfect. No TikTok yet. We're establishing TikTok and kind of.
I do have a TikTok. It's got like a whole 10 followers. I do have some content on there. Feel free to like that. I think that at Casey Larson as well.
I'm just trying to see if we can get some sort of viral. If there's not already a viral ski jumper on TikTok, I think that would be a fun thing to do.
I think there is, and I think he's like really young. Like he's like 14, and just like he's a pretty good little jumper in the U.S., but he's like got a ton of followers.
Wow. Okay then. Gee, I really need to look into TikTok. I feel like I'm that old boomer guy on TikTok. What's that? So we'll get there eventually. Casey, it's been a lot of fun learning about your journey and the sport and everything else. Best of luck for Beijing. We're going to be keeping an eye out there for it. And let's break the drought. Break the drought for US ski jumping. Come on, let's not make it 100 years. We want to make it 98 years. The drought will be broken in Beijing.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.